Hey everyone. Thanks so much for making the time to join this webinar. I never quite know what to call these things anymore because it's webinar, but also podcasts are always live now, aren't they? They're videoed. So it also feels like a video podcast. And I'm not exactly sure where the line is between those two things. They feel like the same thing. But whatever it is that this is, thank you so much for joining us. Uh, Put together today Insider Trends and Jumpmind based on a recent survey that we worked on that was really, really interesting and has been a springboard to have this conversation today with two, I think, people who are absolutely perfect to have this conversation with. So we are going to be looking today at what we're calling the connected shopper. So this is based on a study, someone that comes into the physical store and is actually having quite a digital experience within that store, and we're thinking about what is the impact on that. How should retailers be reacting to that? How can staff be better supported to provide great experiences for these connected shoppers? We're going to be discussing all aspects of that. I'm really pleased to say with Lauren Cevallos from Jumpmind and Ian Scott of Ian Scott Retail Consulting. Guys, introduce you both. Introduce yourselves. Ian, you first, and then we'll go to Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Yeah, I'm an independent retail consultant. My son describes my job as going shopping and taking photos, which I think is one of the best descriptions I've had. Much like you, Jack, I get to travel the world, visiting shops, showing them off, and talking about them to various people in the retail sector.
Thanks, Ian. And yeah, I didn't properly introduce myself, but I am just the same as Ian. That's the simplest way of putting it. I do the same thing. Thanks, mate. And Lauren.
Hi, I am responsible for strategy here at Jumpmind. So we are a POS software company. Prior to this, I was actually an analyst covering store experience. So I've thought a lot about what makes a really great store experience. So naturally, it was just wonderful to commission a new piece of research, and I'm excited to unpack it with you today.
Thanks so much, Lauren. And I should say I've known both and worked with both Lauren and Ian for some time now. So this is really nice because it's just like chatting with two friends about, one of the things I'm most interested in. So we're going to kick off. And I should say, this is Lauren working at Jumpmind, but also with her background as an analyst. And Ian as being someone who is so immersed and always has been in the physical store, I think are both really, really well placed to dig into some of this stuff. And what we're going to dig into, I'm just going to tee us off here, are a couple of insights that really stood out from the survey we did. So anyone, by the way, that signed up for this or watches the recording, we can send this and we'll be sharing it online. But a couple of key things that stood out for me, probably the first thing, was that in this survey we found out that more than half, 53% of Europeans use their phone for help while shopping in a physical store. And that just really stood out to me, particularly the for help part, because all of a sudden you're kind of picturing, wow, more than half of these people, who are in this physical retail environment where me instinctively, as someone who grew up going to a store to find everything I need, right? Where online wasn't a thing. The store was where I found what I needed, found the information that I needed. But now you have more than half of these people going in and their instinct rather than speaking to a staff member or looking around the store, is actually first to quickly check something on their phone. It's such a fundamental shift. And I'm not saying necessarily just a challenge or an entirely negative thing, but just such a different force when it comes to what the physical store is doing, what staff are doing in that space. There are a few other stats that really stood out, though, Lauren. So if I could pass to you firstly, Lauren, just to talk about maybe that and what else in our study you found really interesting.
So I have to admit that sometimes when we do these new pieces of research, I'm not often surprised by a lot because I feel like over time, trends, you start to notice like shifts in behavior over time.
Mm.
And so when I was looking at this and thinking like what really is kind of sticking out to me, it was the sense of like physical stores, it's low tech isn't really as much of a thing anymore. Like every store is like kind of digitized now because of the fact that shoppers are coming in and they're using their smartphones. Technology is present within the store.
Yeah.
So that dynamic itself is creating, say, new challenges, new new interaction modes. And so that was kind of like one moment where that was a little bit of like an aha. Like every retailer has to sort of think about their stores as being digitized in a certain sense. And then the other part that stuck out to me too, even as more shoppers are looking to kind of self-serve using their phones, I still see um, I still see these signs that what ultimately still makes a really great store experience, it is still that human interaction. So even though more shoppers are like using their phones to find information, when they can't find that information or it's just not available and they do expect to be able to find an associate and ask them a question, the extent to which that associate can actually help them and provide like friendly, accurate information, like that really does stick with a shopper and continues to nurture loyalty. So I still think that that's such an important part when it comes to how retailers can differentiate. Like, yes, they have to think about these self-serve moments and strategies should support that. But like let's be clear that the associate experience, like the human to human experience, is still ever so important. So those were two things that stuck out to me.
Yeah, I love that, Lauren. And I'm going to come back to a couple of them in a minute, and particularly, so I hadn't thought about it in the way that you just put it at any point, but even a kind of low-tech, non-tech store now has to strategically think of itself differently because even that store, they've still got half of their customers coming in who might look at a phone in store, but forgetting them, they've got a vast majority of their customers who will have some sort of digital relationship with them. So in a sense, you
Yeah.
can't really think of any space as completely non-tech. That is a really, really good point. Ian, like there'll be loads
Mm.
for us to talk about, but one specific thing that I wanted you to jump off on because of this. As soon as I saw this, I was thinking about me and you over the years have talked a lot about the paradox of choice.
Mhm.
I remember reading it actually, like the Barry Schwartz book, like a long time ago, but not
Mm.
really even related to retail. I think early on, I did some copywriting in the early part of my career. I remember reading it as part of some kind of like marketing training thing, and I found it super interesting because maybe it was
Mm.
published a long time ago. But you then, I remember a few years ago, were talking to me about it just in terms of stores, and I always found
Mm.
your perspective on it absolutely fascinating because it was one of the first things you talk about in terms of how a store was laid out. What I pose to you here is, firstly, tell everyone a bit about what paradox of choice is, and and why you talk
Mm.
about it and you're interested in it. But also, then I'd ask you, what does paradox of choice mean today in a store where someone comes into the store with and wants an interaction maybe with a staff member with all these options, but then they're also going onto their phone and looking at like loads of other options that aren't even in that store. Like,
Yeah.
how overloaded is that person, and what do we do about that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the paradox of choice is a psychologist's phrase, but it simply means when you offer so many options, people get overwhelmed and they can't make a decision. And we've said, I often used to reference the old school sports stores where you'd have a wall full of trainers or sneakers, where they go, we've got 500 products here, so they show all 500 on a wall. And your challenge then is you get overwhelmed. And it's like, well, I want a running shoe, and you're faced with 500 shoes. So how do you select? And there have been various studies looking at how many things a human can absorb and contemplate at one time, and various results pitch it somewhere between 4 and 7. And I often use a telephone number as a wonderful way of contextualizing this because most telephone numbers are 11 digits. But you don't see a telephone number as 11 digits because you can't read them all. They're grouped into threes and fours. And it's a
Yeah.
wonderful example of breaking things down into bite-sized chunks. So when you come into a store, you see clever stores, and Nike are one of the best at this. Instead of 500 shoes on a wall, there'll be a group of 6, there'll be a group of 9, and there'll be space, and there'll be a screen, and there'll be messaging, and each little area has room to breathe. Swatch do it as well. If you think every product in a Swatch store is exactly the same shape and size, but they'll
Mm.
have little panels and there'll be groups of 6, 8, 9 watches in one individual panel. So that ability to break it down is just reversing into how humans absorb information and make decisions. And I love Lauren's comment, about how surprising it is that people are now sort of referring to phones. But to me, I just see we're using our phones all the time, the doom scrolling sort of
Mm.
behavioral aspect. where if we've got nothing else to do, we refer to it. And you look at anyone on an underground train, they're all on their phones because they've got nothing else to do. So they go, oh,
Yeah.
let's get our phone. So what you're finding, this is becoming a default action behaviorally. But also, again, the challenge that Lauren referred to is a member of staff may have 500 SKUs in the store that they're selling. So they need to be a generalist about 500 things. If I'm looking to buy one product, I may have spent a week researching it on my phone. So I'm suddenly a subject matter expert walking into the store, and the poor store colleague doesn't have the ability to deep
Yeah.
dive into 500 products like that. So they're facing this issue. So you're immediately creating a really interesting situation where you have experts coming in, and there's a danger of overwhelming people with information and choice at the same time. And so you have these two aspects that are sort of fighting for sort of prioritization. And it becomes very difficult in a store for colleagues to handle all the inquiries, but also for shoppers to then absorb information and make sort of qualified decisions as well.
Yeah. And so moving from that, because the way I see it, thinking about how you've always described that to me, and then it's a simplified way of looking at it, but basically you
Mm,
throw you have that context, but you throw what's happening, not just on the phone, but the way that AI is kind of aggregating and just sort of sucking in all kinds of extra information
mm.
that are constantly at the surface of someone's own feeds on their phone, right? As soon as they
Yeah.
go in. Um, Clear to me that then there's both a challenge and an opportunity in these moments in stores
Yeah.
as a person is on their phone looking at that and they're in a space and a staff member is coming at them. On the one side, looking cynically and negative, you think, my goodness, like staff are already, it's a hard time often to be working on the shop floor in a retail store. You've just got this extra barrier. That's, so,
Mm,
so how do you overcome that? The other side of it, though, the opportunity is, actually can systems, maybe fueled by AI, actually really empower staff so that they can start talking to someone and have an idea about what they might be looking at on their phone, or more to the point, being kind of so empowered and knowledgeable and ready in the moment to be able to actually be more useful than that person's
mm.
phone in that moment in the store, right? In some way, that's what I think is the opportunity. Lauren, I think because of your background and a lot of what you do now, just at a high level, how can really good systems actually help a staff member in these moments to really be able to improve that customer experience?
I think it's a really hot topic for sure. Like oversimplifying it, I think there's like a couple big parts of this. I think on the one hand side, every brand and retailer, if they don't already have it, they're going to need a, what is it? AIO. It's like artificial intelligence optimization strategy. So it's like SEO.
Yeah,
Like as a brand or a company, you're like trying to have some control over how you're represented online. Well, now we have to think about that from like an LLM standpoint. So I think the research had pointed to like 14% of shoppers in Germany, I want to say, use, say, ChatGPT while shopping in a store. And that's not a ton, like that's 14%, but that's maybe going to grow. Like that might
yeah,
become more important and more ingrained as just more people become used to using LLMs in their everyday life. So certainly a big part of that is having like that AIO strategy in place. In terms of in a store, I mean, we're on the tech side, like we talk about this all the time, is like what really is the role of AI? And to be honest, it's kind of an uncomfortable conversation because we're as a company all about empowering humans and like human connections. So this is just like a different sort of question on like, well, how much like should AI, like a non-human entity, really drive that experience? I think there's a lot of questions with no real answers. I think we have a hypothesis over what that looks like. We believe that it really is all about augmenting the associate by like synthesizing lots of data, very quickly, having the right interface, like the right place to put that output in a way where the associate can very easily like and quickly access it. So for
yeah,
us, the UI. Like we're POS, we exist in the hands of like every associate. So naturally POS is a really great place to put something like a chatbot or like an AI summary. We still have to be very thoughtful about the design and the user experience, because there are going to be associates that don't want to use it, like,
Yeah.
or there are going to be retailers that don't want to give that tool to an associate because they're just not ready for that. So we have to think about that from a design standpoint. How are we not making something that's not useful front and center? We don't want to add noise to the experience. So there's the design element of it. And again, so we're thinking of AI again as a tool that just synthesizes information, so that hopefully the associate can at least be on par with the customer that's coming in the store. Whether or not they choose to ask a question, that's still, we believe, kind of up to the associate to use their best judgment in the moment. But it's certainly going to create a lot of challenges for retailers to like feed it with data, to train those models, to be able to make sure that they're accurate and whatnot. So it's placing new burdens on retailers for sure. But again, at least from a tech standpoint, we're thinking about it in terms of like, how do you actually place it so that it's helpful and not adding noise for associates?
Yeah.
I love that. You saw if I just jump in
No,
for
no,
a
go
second,
in, please.
because we've all been to conferences and trade shows recently, and it's just drowning in AI. But what I find is the people are excited about the principle, and what's so reassuring, Lauren, is that you're talking about how can we assist the store colleague. And I get some people, you get some of the crazy people like the Zuckerbergs, and they're going, we don't need humans anymore, and it's self-serving their own agenda. Whereas I think in retail, you have so many variables because humans are involved. So just as you say, you'll have companies that won't want to impose it on their colleagues. Each colleague will react differently and have a different approach, but also you also have to factor in the customers, because the same customer will want loads of help on one mission and want to be left on their own on the next, and that's the same customer. So there are huge variables in how technology will assist a sale. And I think it's really important to understand all of those variables and then go, how can this potentially augment and help, rather than how can it take over and replace? And
Yeah.
too many people are talking like that. And it's quite scary, because we know store colleagues are an expensive overhead in a business, but they're one of the unique aspects of a physical store. You take them out of it, and you may as well just have a website or an app. You're losing one of the fundamental benefits of a physical store is social interaction. And
Mm.
COVID taught us the value because we got denied it for a while. And we understood that this is actually really important to our just general well-being and lives. So I always think the technology should augment that relationship where needed, rather than go, you must do this. It's like, well, if you want to, you can use this to help this specific situation. And we appreciate that the next situation may be different and you don't need us, or you need to use us in a different way.
Think
I,
about being a shopper. Oh, sorry. I mean,
go, Lauren. Go,
wait,
go.
think about being a shopper and you go into a store because, well, you're expecting to talk to someone who's
Mm.
knowledgeable and an expert, and you ask a question. And imagine that associate pulls out a phone and asks the exact same question right in front of you. I mean, how awkward is that? I mean,
Yeah,
at the very least, as the shopper, you're like second guessing the advice that you're about to get. I mean,
yeah.
that's not a great experience for anyone involved, for the brand, for the shopper, for the associate. So that's a very good point. Like the shopper experience is so important here. And I would also say another place where we actually see it being valuable for the associate is when they're away, because there are moments happening in a store where they're not in front of a customer. So
Yeah.
they're preparing for an appointment, they're like a consultant and they're getting ready for, one of their customers to come into the fitting room. That could actually be a good moment to use AI for recommendations or personalization moments. Like, hey, tell me about, like, in the last several months, like, what has this customer purchased? Have there been any changes? Like, have there been any returns like recently that we should know about? Just to have, again, more context, or maybe it would have taken them 10 minutes, to go through and review that customer's history. Now they
Mm.
can save those 10 minutes because they probably honestly have 10 other things that they're supposed to be doing. So being like there are so many other moments where they're not in front of a customer where we think it could add value. But I love that you mentioned the consumer experience, because yeah, that again, that would be so awkward.
Well, I think so.
Exactly.
A couple of big takeaways that I might even want to just talk about even more because I think they're so important in all of this. Lauren, you said a minute ago about getting the staff member on a par with a customer in terms of, information. So synthesizing data to make sure at the very least they feel up to speed with what that customer might be seeing. That for me is like completely it. Like, it's like nail on the head because my worry at the moment is like, I don't know, it could be anything from like they're coming into a store and there's a product that's gone viral and they're expecting to find that product with this brand, but this product is less. Look at how resale is going on Vinted. This product is from 20 years ago, and it's maybe elsewhere, right? And so they're coming in looking for something that isn't just not stocked there. It might not be stocked anywhere, but nonetheless, that staff member at that moment, you would want them to know that because it's going to be really important for their relationship with their customer and just to look like they're on the ball to know that that's happening. And I think you can't just expect your staff just to know all this stuff, right? Because it's just insane. So a bit of me is like that thing about synthesizing data, but it could be all kinds of data, is so important. But then your other point, which is really the other big point, is making sure that those systems give the staff that information, in one place at the right moment, because they are managing so many things. Because I also don't want to be saying to staff members here, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to have to do loads of extra work to be able to keep up with this stuff, and you're going to have to do it in lots of different places. You've got to have 20 new apps downloaded. It made me think of something the other day. There's a clienteling company that I was sort of doing a thing with. You would both know who this clienteling company is, and they're very good. And they were saying they had some AI fueled kind of tool that would give staff members a really important kind of cue about a customer that walked in the door, and they'd had this built for ages and it never really worked, and they were playing around with this part of it for ages, and the minute that it started working was as soon as they actually put it in the right place. It wasn't about the tool and whether it worked, it was that the staff member had too many things going on. But when they had it, so that in this particular case it was on Shopify, and they were able to get it into like there's like a notes part in Shopify. Lauren, you'd know more about this from your Forrester days, I'm sure, your technical expertise. Like that they could put it right there at the kind of proper point of sale in Shopify, so they couldn't miss it. And that one simple switch, which was always possible, changed everything. And so you realize it's just it's making sure, yeah, staff are on a par, but giving them the right information at the right time is the thing, right? And Lauren, I don't know if you could like maybe talk a little bit more about that, because to me that is so important here.
Placement is so important, and that's like it's not going to be shocking to anyone to hear that. Like, yeah, AI is super powerful, but if it's not in the right place, like if it's not in a place where the right user who can actually do something with it, it's not in a natural place for them, they're not gonna, then it's pointless. It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
You're investing in all of this tooling. You've got expectations for the business, and it's just not going to actually get executed in the store. So you're absolutely right. Like that is something that just seems so obvious. Like, make sure it's in the right place. And then again, we go back to, it needs to be, it's in a physical store. It's got to be a quick hit. Like, we can't show a store associate like this huge summary with like key insight here, key insight here, key insight here, when the associate's trying to like in 5 seconds, like understand like, okay, what do I need to know rather quickly so I can get on with my day. So like how you deliver it briefly, in context, in the right interface. These are all like design challenges that is actually quite fun for us, from a tech standpoint. We're doing a lot of like research. Honestly, like this is a golden moment for research. We want to really get it in the hands of store associates in different store formats. So that way we can gather learnings, because if you're an associate like in a Target, you're going to need different types of like AI driven tooling versus if you're like in a Lululemon or something like that. So it also depends on the store. And I just have to say, the scenario you described about something going viral, this came up to me like yesterday
Yeah.
that a major brand had a pair of leggings that went viral, and all of a sudden their stores were getting flooded with phone calls, and people
Yeah.
like shoppers were just saying, hey, like, where can I buy like those viral pink leggings? And the associates were like, what do you mean? Like, which leggings? What's the style? Like, describe it to me. And the shopper's like, I don't
It's
know. They were on TikTok. And again, just to disconnect. Like, it could have been a moment,
yeah.
like, and it was just a disconnect.
Well, do you know what? Like a really fascinating, slight kind of sidebar here is that, and I've spoken to a couple of fashion businesses recently who have said they would they would do anything to be able to find an AI kind of tool or company that could help them to predict these viral moments so that they could get ready with more of that product. And it was quite funny because at two recent projects, they both said the same thing to me. Is that honestly, this thing went viral, we hadn't planned it, and then the product sold out, and we could have sold it 10 times over. And it's
But
really interesting
isn't
because,
that like trying to predict the
well,
lottery
that's what I
numbers, though,
said though,
Jack?
because
I mean,
and they said to me, and I said,
I'd be,
look,
I'd be getting lottery numbers. I wouldn't be getting pink
but
viral leggings. I'd be on a beach next
it's
month,
so
spending my
interesting.
millions.
Totally, and like Lauren says, and Lauren, you'll hear from loads of your customers. This will keep coming up, like versions of this. How can we? And I thought, well, do you know what? This is also about accepting the limits because the whole point of those moments, is it not? I mean, I might be wrong, but I think AI can predict because of patterns. It can predict a lot of things, and
Mm.
also, like say in fashion, we know it's to a degree cyclical. So maybe half the time you can sort of predict it, but in most cases, it's so completely unpredictable.
Yeah.
And also, is that I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to me because they were saying, "Do you know any tools that would do this?" And I said, "I know if I put on LinkedIn that 50 AI founders will tell me they have the tool, and I know that
Mm.
probably none of them would do it, like
No.
actually be able to do it." And that's not a criticism of it. It's just I don't know how you predict the unpredictable like that.
But virality is irrational, isn't it? Because you got
Totally.
human. It's one guy on the red carpet at the launch of a movie. It's someone else making an off-the-cuff comment in an interview. That's how things go viral. They're not
Yeah.
planned. Because if they were planned, everyone would be going viral and
Well, that's what I mean.
everyone would
Like
be
you could
successful.
you could predict that Lacoste polos from the 80s or 90s worn by some like John McEnroe's whatever, like some tennis top
Yeah.
that he wore in the 80s. You could go, oh, I predict something from that era will go viral, but you don't know
Which
which
one?
like
Which one?
which one Timothy Chalamet is going to suddenly wear for some reason. You don't like it's
Exactly.
so
They get
inexplicable, isn't it?
prompted by an unplanned action.
Yeah,
Most
yeah,
viral things are. Like you
yeah,
say, it's like someone sat in there on a talk show and he just mentions the shoes he's wearing.
yeah,
You can't plan it because if the talk show conversation didn't go in that direction, he wouldn't reference his shoes. So there are too many, and this is what I love. This is where AI, everyone thinks AI is the answer to everything. And this is a great example of just showing it can't because AI references existing data.
yeah.
And virality is an unknown quirk that's going to happen in the future.
I think this is why I like the kinds of things that Lauren's saying when she talks about getting a style associate on a par and good UI, and actually, it's about being rooted in common sense things that it can do, rather than this constant sense of maybe it could do this transformational thing that we don't really understand. It's like actually that we don't need to be doing that. Let's figure out how this thing can help people now.
Mm,
Because it's enormously powerful, and there are very. It feels like if we get it right, there's a lot of low hanging fruit, basically,
mm.
as opposed to real hypothetical stuff. Just go back to this. So Ian, just on your side. So I covered a lot there about system, tech, AI related stuff to take on the challenge of this connected shop and then walk in the store. But just briefly, right on that point, I can think because I've seen you in presentations talk about these kinds of things before. Are there good examples where also, not from a technology point of view, but sort of inspirational examples of, what staff can do for that kind of a customer? Because I guess it's not just about the phone, but you're also talking about a customer, I guess, that might seem that they are difficult to connect with, right? They're sort of in their
Yeah.
own shell, perhaps if they're on their phone. They kind of maybe half think they already know. Have you got good examples of brands or companies that kind of handle that kind of shopper well? Is it just about doing remarkable things in store that make you put your phone away because you're like, God, this is amazing? Or is it like, I remember, Dr. Martens, I always remember people talking about Dr. Martens were great at doing, great little kind of stories next to each product on the shelf. and hearing that that was not just for customers but for staff, because it would be a little
Yeah.
conversation starter. I'm thinking, can you think of any stuff like that kind of you think are quite inspiring for brands to think, well, this is how you engage someone that seems
Yeah.
unengageable?
I thought you were setting me up to talk about Lush there. I
You
thought I'm going to
can talk
shoehorn them
about
in some,
Lush.
but no,
You
no, I
can
know.
talk
You
about
know,
Lush.
I'm contractually obliged to talk about
Yeah, yeah,
Lush in
yeah.
every podcast. But no, one of the things that actually sprung to mind was I'm trying to remember the beauty brand. I saw a Bicester retail outlet, Bicester Village, one of the most successful premium retail outlets in Europe. And it was one of the beauty brands, and I'll try and remember who they are as we're going through. But what I love was all the staff had a little card around their neck, almost like those visitor tags when you go to a trade show. And it was the latest promotion, but on the back there were descriptions of the products and how they worked in this promotional package. So they had it facing out, so it was a promotion to engage. So as colleagues were talking to shoppers, they could see the promotion. But on the back was information that the colleague could use to explain more detail to the shopper. And it worked both ways because it was assisting the shopper and it was also assisting the colleague at the same time. And what I loved was it was a simple bit of printed card. It was like, I'm not anti-technology, but sometimes you just print a little card and hang it around someone's neck and it does the job. And you see these various versions, and I will now go back to Lush because you've given me the framework to do it. But what I love about their staff is they don't come in and go, "Hello, can I help you?" Because if the answer is no, the shutters come down, and that's the end of the interaction. I wear flowery shirts. So I'm known for wearing flowery shirts. And I walked in there once and a colleague went, "I love your shirt. Where did you buy it from?" And it was like, obviously, I like wearing shirts like this. So they reversed into a conversation and a topic they knew I would be happy to talk about. So we had a 5-minute conversation, and her brother or someone liked flowery shirts. So we had this fun, left me alone after that, and I'll let you look around the store. But then that contact was made. So the moment I would have a question, I would seek out that person because we'd made the connection. It's like someone who says hello to you at the start of a party. It's much easier to go and talk to them later on in the evening than someone you don't know. So those sort of breaking barriers and making contacts are wonderful because you can then talk around virtually anything. So
Yeah.
not the classic, "Can I help you?" It's the worst question. I mean, we all know you should always ask open-ended questions, but even then, starting the conversation on a human level, not on a shopping, buying product level, is much more natural as a human as well. And I think the more we utilize those human skills, the more you can draw it in. And like this beauty brand, it becomes an interactive conversation. You've got the card and you can talk about flipping, "Oh, I've got more information on the other side." And it becomes conversational, which is natural. And the more you reverse into natural human behavior in this transactional commercial environment, the more engaging it is and the more it'll have more effect, I think.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me, I remember once a luxury brand told me that part of their like weekly training they did with all store staff, and they did it informally, was that they would talk about all the other luxury brands and products globally, like what was in and what people were buying, what people were interested in. They do more of that than even on their own products because they said, actually, most of our customers, they are going to be buying and being interested in all kinds of other luxury products. And your easiest way of talking to them is going to be talking about luxury more broadly, and even travel and other stuff. They would just
Yeah.
constantly be talking about news in that world, so that they could have that initial conversation. Because they said the conversation is so much better if you start there and then come back to your own products
Yeah.
versus the other way. Like you're all, and yeah, I really love
But
that.
it's quite disarming as well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it
Where
is
you
absolutely.
expect a salesperson to go on about their product and how good it is, and
Yeah.
to be broader and maybe even reference a competitor, not in a way that's suggesting you buy from them, but it shows not only awareness, but an empathy and a reality that your whole world doesn't exist as a shopper in their store. Your
Yeah, well,
your
totally. Or
life
like
goes
when
beyond it, doesn't it?
that magic thing, we all love this, but when a member of staff compliments something you're wearing that isn't from that shop,
Yeah.
I'm amazed more. Like everyone should be doing that. For me, that would be like number
Yeah.
one in a store. It's the
Yeah.
most because everyone loves it. I don't care what anyone says. Some introverts would be like,
Well,
I
there's
don't
more
like. We all
positivity
like
than
compliments.
negativity. You
Exactly.
get head office going, you don't do that. But as a
Yeah.
human, as a shopper, I'm always like, "Oh, that's a cool thing to say." And it
Yeah.
makes you warm to the person more, which means you're more likely to
Totally.
buy from them.
Um,
It's that's
for
much
for
better.
this last bit, there was another kind of um there was another. There are a few things in the survey that really stood out, but probably the other big kind of area, which we won't, we'll just spend 5 minutes on, but I know it's something I've spoken about with both of you before, so just get a quick take from both of you on it. So this European focus study found that 63% of Europeans have used self checkouts outside of grocery.
Mm.
High, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what I would have expected. I'm not really sure what I would have expected. That means has used at some point, doesn't mean it's their preference, right? So I'd say the majority of those 63% will probably mostly use other things, but it does show a willingness to use it. Lauren, you can confirm if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's higher than in the US. Um,
I think it is higher than the US. I think typically we see that at least in Europe, self-checkout usage is a bit higher.
yeah,
My sort of read on it was it's really still about choice. Like there is
yeah,
no single preferred or best checkout method. Like so much of it just depends on like what the customer's buying, like
Mm.
quantities that they're buying, how complex those, items might be. And so at least for us from like a tech perspective, we try to think about the flexibility, say to have one platform, you can do self checkout, you can do assisted checkout. It can be like a mobile device, but it's literally you can use the same iPad, and it can be a mobile device for in aisle, line busting. You could also like with a button turn it into a self checkout, mode, and it's responsive. It's responsive
yes,
software, and so because we find like at least with our customers are trying to figure out like what are the right modes, or we might want to have like a flagship store that has a totally different type of checkout experience for
yeah,
certain reasons, or we're really not sure, we want to experiment, like we really want to figure out what our customers expect like from our experience. And so again, I think technology just needs to be flexible to that, honestly,
mm,
because it depends every region. I think we even broke it down by different
yeah,
areas within Europe and kind of saw some different things. So
yeah,
it's all about choice.
yes.
Well,
It
this is,
it,
I mean,
it really is.
sorry.
No, go
I
for
mean,
it, Ian.
I think this reverts back to what I was saying at the start as well, and the challenges of different shoppers. When I look at checkout, if I go to a store and there's both options, I will normally pick the quickest and easiest one. There's a WH Smith's in my train station in London, and there's loads of self-checkout and a counter, and there's often queues for the self-checkout. So I go to the counter because it's quicker. So if you're sitting there doing camera observation and research, they're going, "Oh, Ian likes the man checkout." No, it was quicker. The next time the self-checkout's free, I will use that. And I just go, "Come on, this is like just common sense." But then coming back to this approach about self-checkout across regions, I think it often reflects willingness to change and embrace new ideas. And Americans get very annoyed when I say this, but they are slower to change and adopt new ideas. But then having said that, Europe is way behind Asia. Asia adopt new things and embrace it, which is why I
Yeah,
think they're probably 3 years ahead of Europe, and Europe's probably 2 or 3 years ahead of America. And that's a cultural thing, massive generalization here, but the adoption of new ideas. In 2019, I was in China in a concept supermarket grocery store that was doing within kilometers. It's now very standard. People were moving house to get within the catchment area when it first came in. And I
mm,
watched a man who must have been in his 70s paying for his grocery with facial recognition.
mm,
And I posted about Bluetooth shopping trolley where you put a strap around your wrist and the trolley follows you. And everyone in Europe and America was going, "Oh, that won't work. The trolley will crash." And while everyone in the Western world was explaining why it won't work, the Asians were using it. So
yeah,
you often find this cultural shift in adopting of new ideas. But also, I think when it comes to checkout, I think different missions, like you say, if you're in a rush, you're picking the quickest thing. If you have a lot of stuff, you may go, "Oh, it's easier to do the manned conveyor belt because there's a lot of stuff." And there are too many variables to just go, Americans do this and Europeans do that. There is a different adoption, but each mission will have its own potential requirements for checkout. And then you've got a human involved who's fickle, inconsistent, and emotionally driven. So that just puts a randomness. And then it's how busy they are and what time of day. So they're really difficult to just summarize in a simplistic way, I think.
yeah. It is, and it feels. I mean, maybe, and I think the survey, like the stats in the survey, probably support or reinforce mostly what a lot of people would think. But I feel like the whole thing is kind of settled now. I don't think self-checkout is quite the it's not people aren't quite as excited by it, and I mean that in a good way. It's not the shiny new thing anymore, and I think it's used more in a practical way. Like now, I will regularly, obviously, I'm at airports often, and I regularly, especially in Europe, will see incredibly good use of self-checkout, like all the time. I think that is great. Like I'm in a rush, and I can see it at the distance, and I'll be like, I know how that works. That's really good because I'm rushing to my gate, and I can use it to buy a bottle of water or whatever, and it's brilliant. And Uniqlo, who are like the exception to the rule, have self-checkout in almost all their stores. It works amazingly well. Everyone loves it. Brilliant. Primark, no self-checkout whatsoever because they want to upsell product next to the till. They like people queuing. And they're growing every year, right? I was looking the other day. Primark, no self-checkout. They had a great year last year.
I
Uniqlo,
saw a store. I saw one of their stores with some checkout tills the other day, actually.
oh
In Dutch,
really?
first time ever, but there were
Primark
only a
with
few.
self-checkout.
Yeah,
Oh
very,
Lord.
very
Well, there you go.
surprising.
Okay,
Yeah,
even they are going that way. It's incredible. But I feel like, yeah, mostly when I look across it, and then Zara like have a version of it, but often we have to like pull the thing out yourself, and H&M have theirs, and blah blah blah. I think actually it feels like most brands, mature brands, they've kind of that they're quite a way down the journey now, and actually they might do. It, I think what the good ones anyway, most of them, they've realised well, it's an element of choice. They'll do it where it works.
yeah.
They'll do a little bit in certain formats or they won't do it. And funnily enough, the thing I see the most now actually is a thing that isn't really a trendy thing, it's just a practical thing. It's just more like a mobile solution more, even
Yeah.
in mass market store. The amount of times now in like a big sports store, I'll see, and it isn't really promoted heavily, but you'll just see that there are fixed checkouts, but actually staff can also check out in different parts of the store. And I always think, God, that's really, really good. But it's not kind of flashy. It's just entirely practical.
Yeah. It's
They've
like tap to
realized
pay on the handheld
yes, exactly.
devices and
They've
things like
realized, you
that.
know
Yeah.
what, that's what we need. We don't need people checking out themselves, but what we do maybe need is some fluidity about the way that process works. Because this is a big store and maybe it makes sense for them to check out in that part of the third floor rather than walking all the way back down. So, yeah, maybe it's just me, but I feel like the whole thing's getting a bit more practical, a
It's
common
Yeah,
about
sense.
choice, isn't it?
more
Sorry.
than the method, I think really important aspects of the checkout experience to key in on are things like loyalty. Because I think when we look at the data, and
Mm,
it's unsurprising that shoppers want to overwhelmingly they're part of a retailer's loyalty scheme because that's where presumably they're going to get value. And but also I've seen heard anecdotally and seen data to show that it's difficult actually today for shoppers to understand how many loyalty points they have or like how to redeem them. So I think regardless of what like the checkout, if it's self checkout, if it's man checkout or whatnot, thinking about like how are we serving those experiences, that like customer, like the payment experience as well, like are you making it easy for shoppers to do things like pay with whatever method they want, look up their loyalty or sign up for loyalty, redeem their loyalty, and things like that. So I agree. I think it's kind of beyond the actual like checkout method, but there are still like some fundamental aspects to the experience that sometimes there's a little bit left to be desired. So
yeah, yeah, there really is. Um, I'm going to start to wrap things up because we, as I expected, would have talked with a lot of energy, and I thought we'd been talking for about 20 minutes, but we've been talking for 45 minutes, which is what happens when you enjoy the conversation you're having. Um, so maybe just kind of like closing remarks. I think so. The big thing, so my takeaways, above anything else, I think would be empowering that staff member when they're facing what is going to be whatever happens. I mean, this is what, regardless of anyone's prediction about how AI influences any part of the retail experience. What we do know is, back to Lauren's point, even the most low tech shopping experience is a tech fueled shopping experience because everyone in some capacity is on their phones or online in some capacity before they go in a store, while they're in a store. And that means some of what's happening is also influenced by AI, whether it's in those searches or in those experiences. And there's a lot of work, but also a lot of opportunity and just empowering a staff member to be on a par. I love that point. And in relationship with that, empowering them with good systems, information at the right moment, the right information at the right moment. Um, and I think, that for me is kind of something I'll really kind of take away from this. So if I go to both of you for closing remarks, I'll ask you both just maybe for any retailer brand watching this, listening to this, what are like one or two simple things for them to be thinking about when it comes to this slightly overwhelmed connected shopper looking at their phone that they should be thinking about long term. Couple of just simple takeaways, from this. I'll go to you first, Lauren.
I have a boring answer.
No, boring's good.
Don't forget the basics. Clean stores, great merchandising, beautiful lighting, clean fitting rooms if you have them. As much as we talk about tech, so often, I think some companies forget about the basics or they kind of let that slide. And shoppers care enormously about that. So just not explore, experiment to the ability you can, or to the extent that you can. But again, don't forget about the basics.
Love it. And I think that really fits with the system piece as well, actually. That's what that is. It's giving the staff the basics as well. That's great, Lauren. Ian, one simple kind of takeaway from your side.
Well, for me, I often think when you're trying to just sort of drive and improve the way things work, the first thing is understand why people are in your store. Why are they coming in? It's that you need to understand the shopping missions. There are some missions where it's about discovery. There's some missions about availability, and I always joke about the husband on his way home has forgotten his wedding anniversary. Price is not an issue here. Availability is. There may be other missions that are more about discovery or gifting or just general everyday replenishment. If you understand why people come into the store, and then you understand the challenges and the opportunities that members of staff have, then you should be using things like the technology to plug those gaps and enhance and enable the staff to cope with all of those different missions. And it starts with understanding those missions. If you do not know why someone is coming into your store,
Mm,
then you're guessing at what you should be doing to help them. And I say retail is such an expensive place to guess and get it wrong. So
mm.
understand why they're there, understand what capability you have to deal with all of those scenarios. And where there are gaps, then you start looking at how you can plug and augment with staff training, technology, communication to assist the process so people will stay longer and buy more.
Love it. Thanks so much, Ian. And thanks to both of you. As always, I've really enjoyed talking to you both.
Mm.
Brilliant insights, as I expected. Thanks for everyone for taking the time to listen to this, whether you've attended live or you listened to the recording. Really appreciate it. We'll be sharing again the survey we worked on together with Jumpmind and the research, and there's a couple of pieces that we've put out as well that I think are quite interesting reads for both Jumpmind and our side. So we'll share all of that if any of this was interesting. But that's it for now. So thanks so much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.